27 years ago, an entire class disappeared without a trace until one desperate mother spotted a small, forgotten clue that would unravel a chilling secret no one dared to face. The morning was cool, fresh, and filled with excitement. It was the kind of day that every school child looks forward to, a school trip day. 23 children from Class 4 of Mount Valley School, in a quiet town near the Himalayan foothills, were getting ready to leave for a picnic to a nearby valley. They were all between 8 and 10 years old. Their faces were bright and their eyes sparkled with joy. Some carried snacks packed by their mothers, others had their favorite toys, cameras, or storybooks. The teacher in charge, Miss Angeli, was young and friendly. She was loved by the students and known by the townspeople for being responsible and kind. The bus, a small private one rented just for the day, arrived at the school gate around 8:30 a.m. Parents stood nearby, watching as their children boarded, waving and taking photos. Some of them felt nervous. It was a hilly area, after all, but they trusted the school. It wasn't the first time a trip had been planned. The children waved goodbye. The teacher did a quick head count, and the bus drove off toward the hills. That was the last time anyone saw the children or the teacher. The hours passed. Noon turned into afternoon, and then evening. The return time had been set for 5 p.m., but when 6:30 came and went, the waiting parents grew worried. By 7 o'clock, they had gathered near the school again, whispering to each other, making phone calls, trying to stay calm. The school authorities tried to contact the bus driver, but his phone was off. Miss Angeli was not reachable either. By 9 p.m., panic had spread across the town. The police were informed, and search parties were organized. Flashlights, dogs, drones, and volunteers searched all night through forested roads, broken paths, and steep slopes. Nothing, no tire marks, no broken branches, no signs of any accident or struggle. It was as if the bus had driven into thin air. The next morning, helicopters joined the search. Every inch of the road to the picnic spot was checked. They even expanded the search to nearby villages and old logging roads. Still, there was no sign of the bus, the teacher, or the 23 children. It was unthinkable. How could a whole class vanish? Without a trace, the media got involved. News reporters came from nearby cities. TV channels played interviews of weeping parents. Rumors started spreading. Some said it was a kidnapping. Others blamed wild animals, while a few even believed it was something supernatural. But the police found no evidence. There was no ransom demand, no blood, no broken glass. The roads were dry and clear that day. The weather had been perfect. Among the parents was Mira Call, the mother of a 9-year-old girl named Anya. Anya was her only child, born after years of prayer and pain. Mira was a single mother who worked as a librarian in the town's public library. Her life revolved around her daughter. They were more like best friends than mother and daughter. That morning, Mira had packed Anya's favorite cheese sandwiches and tied her hair in 2 neat braids. She remembered how Anya had laughed and said, "Mama, I'll bring back wildflowers for you." Now she stood outside the school building holding the same lunchbox, untouched in her hands. Her world had gone quiet, like the whole town had stopped breathing. The days that followed felt like slow-moving nightmares. Search operations continued, but every night brought more disappointment. People whispered in the streets, candles were lit in churches and temples, and prayers were offered across the town. But weeks passed, and nothing changed. The police issued a formal statement 3 weeks later. The investigation would be scaled down, but not stopped. They said the bus may have fallen into a hidden gorge or been swept away by a river. But they couldn't explain how there was no oil leak, no broken part, no bus door, no backpack or shoe found anywhere. There was no crash sound heard by anyone. In the region that day, it was like the earth had swallowed them. Slowly, the town tried to return to normal life. The school closed for a month, then reopened with empty seats and broken hearts. The teachers avoided looking at the unused classroom. Children spoke in whispers. Many families moved away, unable to live with the silence. The missing children's photos hung on trees and walls like ghosts of the past. Most parents were crushed, helpless, and numb. Some accepted the tragedy, choosing to remember their children with pain and pride. But Mira couldn't let go. Something inside her kept fighting. She didn't believe her daughter had simply disappeared. She had dreams, strange, repeating dreams. In them, she heard her daughter calling her as if from a far-off place. Every morning, she would wake up, look at Anya's drawings on the wall, and feel a new kind of pain. Mira became obsessed with details. She started collecting every article written about the case. She created a timeline, interviewed the other. Parents even visited every road, trail, and shop along the route to the picnic spot. She found an old man who had seen the bus that morning, but he said something strange. It wasn't the usual yellow school bus. It was red. This detail struck her. Mira remembered clearly that the school used a yellow van for trips. Wait, why would they suddenly use a red one? She checked with the school records. The school claimed they had used the usual bus and that it was driven by their regular driver, Ramesh. But Ramesh had vanished too. No one had heard from him since that day. She asked to see the photos from that morning. Some parents had taken pictures. One blurry photo taken by a father in a rush showed a vehicle, but the angle was strange. Mira stared at it for hours. It looked like a different kind of vehicle, a proper school bus, more like a mini truck with windows. She began asking questions again. Why was there no report of a change in vehicle? Why was there no mention of the red bus in the official file? When she went to the police with her concerns, they politely dismissed her. They said she was just grieving and seeing patterns where none existed. But Mira knew she wasn't imagining things. She had spent her entire life reading books, studying people, watching small clues. And something was wrong. She went back to the school. She asked to see the transport logbook for that week. At first, the principal said it was lost. Later, they said it was damaged in a flood. Mira found this odd. She had worked in a library all her life and knew the value of records. The more they tried to avoid her questions, the more determined she became. She remembered something else. Sanya had drawn a picture the night before the trip. It was taped to the refrigerator. In it, she had drawn a red truck with children inside and trees around it. Mira had not paid much attention to it then, thinking it was just imagination. But now it felt like a clue left behind. She looked at the drawing again and noticed a small symbol drawn on the door of the truck. It looked like a triangle inside a circle. She didn't understand what it meant. But she took a photo of the drawing and began asking around. Most people thought it was just a child's art. But an old mechanic in the area looked at it and said, "This looks like the logo of an old transport company that closed many years ago. They used to have red mini trucks." Mira began digging into old company records, business files, and transport permits. She found out that this company had once operated illegally modified passenger trucks in the area, but had been shut down after a major accident. Some of their vehicles had been sold off without proper papers. It was a tiny thread, but Mira held onto it. Most people would have given up. Even the government had quietly moved on. But Mira was not most people. She believed that sometimes the truth hides in the smallest detail. And maybe, just maybe, her daughter had tried to leave her a clue. As the 27th anniversary of the disappearance approached, the rest of the town prepared for a memorial. A new monument was being built in the school garden with the names of the missing children. People were gathering again, to cry, to remember, and to mourn. But Mira wasn't ready to mourn. She was ready to investigate again, armed with a red truck, a child's drawing, and a memory no one could erase. She decided to follow a path others had stopped walking long ago, because somewhere deep inside, Mira Call still believed that her daughter Anya had not vanished into thin air and that the truth was still out there, waiting for someone who refused to stop looking. Years passed, but for Mira Call, the pain never faded. She still walked through the house, as if her daughter Anya might come running down the hallway at any moment. The small shoes on the shelf, the favorite doll sitting on the windowsill, and the last drawing Anya had made remained untouched. The world outside had moved on. People had changed, shops had closed and reopened, new children had grown up and started going to school. But for Mira, time had stopped. Many of the parents from that tragic day had either left the town or tried to rebuild their lives. Some remarried, some had more children. Some had fallen into silence and sadness they never escaped. A few of them refused to talk about what had happened. For them the wound was too deep, and speaking about it only made it bleed again. The school tried to erase the memory of the incident. The classroom was repainted, and new students eventually sat where the lost children once had, but nothing truly disappeared. The town remembered, even if it tried to forget. Mira never stopped asking questions. She visited the police station every year just to check if there had been any updates. The officers had changed. The files had moved to old cupboards. Most of the documents were now yellow and brittle with age. The officers gave her tired, polite smiles and told her that there was no new information. The case had been marked unsolved. Long ago, some officers whispered that the entire incident had been cursed. Others said it was a tragic accident no one had been able to find. But none of that gave Mira peace. She didn't believe in curses. She believed in facts. She believed in her daughter. And deep inside, she believed the story was not over. One rainy afternoon, Mira opened a cupboard to clean old things. Hadn't touched this cupboard in years. It was filled with Anya's notebooks, toys, and school supplies. At the bottom was a small box that Mira had almost forgotten about. Inside were old photos, some handwritten notes, and a diary she had kept for the first few months after Anya disappeared. Her hands trembled as she opened the diary. The pages were filled with her thoughts, prayers, and observations, many of which she had written down in the hope that one day they would make sense. One note stood out. It was about a phone call she had received 2 days after the disappearance. The voice on the phone had been unclear and had said something about a red truck and wrong route. Mira had mentioned it to the police back then, but they had dismissed it as a prank call. She had forgotten about it. But now, reading it again, she felt something strange. Was it really a prank? Or had someone been trying to tell her something? She stared again at Anya's drawing, the one with the red truck and the strange symbol. She remembered the old mechanic who had said the symbol looked like it belonged to a shut-down transport company. That had been years ago. But what if the company's record still existed somewhere? With renewed energy, Mira visited the town's public records office. She spent days going through old transport licenses, vehicle registrations, and expired permits. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Most files were damaged or missing. But on the fourth day, buried under a stack of water-stained papers, she found a small folder. It contained information about a transport company named Sharma Logistics. It had operated in the region in the 1980s and 90s. One vehicle in there. List had a red body and a strange triangular logo inside a circle. Her heart pounded. This was it, the same symbol Anya had drawn. The company had officially closed in 1997, just a year before the children disappeared. The last registered owner of the red vehicle was a man named Shyamlal. No address was listed, just a name and an old phone number. Mira dialed it anyway, but it was disconnected. She then visited the area where the company had once operated. It was now a junkyard full of rusted metal and broken parts. A few workers were still there. They were suspicious of her questions at first, but when she showed them the old company name and the sketch of the truck, one of the older men's eyes widened. "I remember this truck," he said. "It was sold quietly after the company shut down. It wasn't roadworthy, no brakes, bad tires. I heard someone bought it to use in a nearby village. You remember who bought it?" Mira asked, trying to stay calm. "Some private driver, I think. Might have been hired for local work. But that was a long time ago." Mira took a deep breath. It wasn't much, but it was a lead. She started visiting nearby villages, asking people if they had ever seen a red truck used for school trips. Most people shook their heads or said they didn't remember. But in a village called Derry, an old tea seller gave her a new clue. He remembered a driver who had lived there briefly years ago. The man had worked odd jobs, sometimes transported goods, sometimes people. He vanished suddenly after some incident. "What was his name?" Mira asked. "Ramesh," the man replied. Mira froze. That was the same name of the school's usual bus driver, the one who had gone missing with the children. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to ask more. Where had Ramesh gone? Had he ever spoken about working with the school? The tea seller didn't know much, just remembered that Ramesh had seemed nervous the last few days before he disappeared. He had received some money, packed his things, and vanished overnight. Mira thanked the man and made notes. She now had reason to believe that the school had replaced the official bus with a different vehicle, possibly the red truck, and that this change had never been reported. But why? She returned to the school once more. The principal had retired, but an old office assistant still worked there. He remembered the trip and the chaos afterward. Mira asked him if he knew about any last-minute change in the bus. The man hesitated, then said, "There was a problem that morning. The regular bus had engine trouble. I overheard the teachers calling someone to get a replacement. But after the children went missing, everyone stopped talking about it. The school didn't want to be blamed." "Did anyone record that change in the school logbook?" Mira asked. He shook his head. "I don't think so. They wanted to avoid questions, so it was true. The children had gone in a different vehicle, possibly one that wasn't even safe." Mira felt a storm inside her. All these years, the truth had been buried under silence and fear. The school had failed the children and then hidden that failure. She went to the police again, armed with her new findings. She showed them the drawing, the name of the transport company, and the statements from the villagers. This time, the officers took her seriously. They reopened the case, but told her that with so much time passed, it would be difficult to find anything new. But Mira didn't stop there. She posted online about the case. She contacted journalists, podcasters, and bloggers who worked on cold cases. One of them, a young reporter named Priya, became interested. Priya interviewed Mira, collected the evidence, and wrote an article titled "The Red Truck and the Forgotten Children." It went viral. People across the country began sharing the story. Someone even started a public petition demanding a story amending. Fresh investigation. One night, Mira received a message from an unknown number. It was just one sentence. "I know what happened that day." Her heart jumped. She replied quickly, asking who it was. The person didn't answer immediately. Hours passed before another message came. "Meet me at the Old Hill Temple, alone." Mira wasn't sure if it was real or a cruel joke, but she decided to go. The next morning, she traveled to the temple. It was abandoned, half in ruins, surrounded by tall trees. She waited for over an hour. Then a man in his late 50s appeared from the woods. He had a worn face and tired eyes. "You're Mira?" he asked. "Yes. Who are you?" "Hey, my name is Nandan. I was once a driver." "You still know Ramesh? I know about the red truck." He sat beside her and told her a story that chilled her to the bone. He said that the red truck had indeed been used that day. It was arranged by someone connected to a local political figure who wanted to cut costs. They used unlicensed vehicles for such trips often. It was an under-the-table arrangement. The vehicle took a different route through a forest road to avoid traffic. Then it disappeared. "What do you mean disappeared?" Mira asked. Nandan looked away. "I don't know exactly." There were whispers. Something about a shelter deep in the forest, an old building used by people who wanted to create a different kind of school. Mira's mind raced. Was this why no one had ever found the bus? Had they not gone missing by accident, but by design? Nandan stood up, said, "What I know, be careful. There are people who never wanted this story to come out." He left before she could ask more. Mira stood alone in the quiet temple, heart pounding. She felt closer than ever to the truth. What had started with a mother's grief had now turned into something much bigger. This wasn't just about a broken-down truck or a missing driver. It was about a secret buried deep in the hills, a secret that had waited 27 years to be discovered, and Mira Call was ready to uncover it, no matter what it took. Mira sat in her small, quiet room late into the night, surrounded by old papers, maps, and photos spread across the floor. A single lamp lit the room, casting long shadows on the walls. Her fingers moved slowly over a faded road map of the area, tracing the possible routes the red truck could have taken that day, 27 years ago. After the meeting with Nandan at the temple, she felt like a door had opened. It wasn't wide, but it gave her a peek into a world that had been carefully hidden. The truth was no longer buried under rumors and reports, it was just beyond her reach. Waiting to be found, she remembered how Nandan had mentioned a shelter deep in the forest. That word shelter kept echoing in her mind.
What kind
of shelter? Was it a place for people? For children? And why had no one found it before? The forest covered large areas in that part of the hills, much of it still unexplored or forgotten. Old logging paths and forest ranger trails had disappeared over time, swallowed by wild plants and trees. If the truck had taken one of those hidden paths, it could easily have vanished without anyone ever seeing it again. She decided to find out more about these old paths. Early the next morning, she went to the forest department office in town. She asked about old ranger maps, records, anything that could help her. At first, the officer told her they didn't keep such old data anymore. But then, an elderly ranger, Mr. Prodep, overheard her and asked what she was looking for. When she told him about the missing class and the possible route through the forest, his face changed. "I remember that time," he said quietly. "I was on duty then. Everyone was searching the highways and rivers, but I told them to check the forest. No one listened. They said it was too wide, too dangerous, and there was no proof." "Did you see anything unusual?" Mira asked quickly. The man nodded slowly. 3 days after the disappearance, I saw smoke coming from a part of the forest that was not used. I heard voices, children's voices. I reported it, but they ignored me." Mira leaned forward. "Can you show me that area?" The man hesitated. "It's deep inside, not easy to reach, but I can take you if you really want to go." "I have to," she said. 2 days later, they set out on foot, carrying food, water, and a small camping bag. Mira was nervous, but determined. The trail was rough and overgrown. Trees loomed tall and thick. Insects buzzed around them, and the air was heavy with the smell of wet leaves and soil. Mr. Pratop led the way with surprising energy for his age. As they walked, he told her about the old trails once used by smugglers, villagers, and hunters. Most had faded from memory. People didn't go that deep anymore, but he remembered every turn, every fallen tree, every rocky stream. After 5 hours of walking, they reached a clearing. It was surrounded by dense trees. In the middle stood the ruins of an old building, half hidden by vines and moss. The stone walls were cracked, the roof was partly gone, but the structure still stood. It looked like an old colonial house, something built before independence, strong and silent, forgotten by time. "This used to be a hunting lodge," Pratap said. "British officers used it in the early 1900s. After they left, it became a shelter for travelers. Then it was abandoned." They stepped inside. The wooden floor creaked under their feet. Broken furniture lay scattered. The air was cold and smelled of damp wood and dust. Mira walked slowly, her eyes scanning every wall, every corner. In one room, she found an old chair with a torn cushion, and beside it, a shelf full of decaying books. But then something caught her eye, in the next room, scratched into the wall, were several names written in childish handwriting. She stepped closer, heart pounding. One of the names was Anya. Tears filled her eyes. She touched the letters with her fingers. Her daughter had been here, maybe even lived here. She kept moving, her heart now racing, behind a broken cabinet. She found something else, faded papers, drawings, and pages from a notebook. The handwriting was neat, adult, and careful. Looked like a journal. The first page was dated October 1998, 3 months after the children had gone missing. She sat down on the dusty floor and began to read. The entries were written by Miss Angeli, the school teacher, who had vanished with the class. Her writing was calm at first, but grew more emotional with each entry. Mira's hands trembled as she read dot in the first pages. Miss Angeli wrote about the day of the trip. She mentioned how the regular school bus broke down and a different vehicle was arranged. Last minute by someone from the school administration. She didn't know the driver. They were told to take an alternate route through the forest to avoid a roadblock. But after entering the forest, she began to feel uneasy. The driver didn't answer her questions. He turned off the main road and drove deeper into the forest. When she protested, he locked the doors. They drove for over an hour through narrow paths. The children were confused and scared. Finally, they stopped at the old lodge. There were men waiting there, strangers. She didn't recognize any of them. They called it a learning camp and said the children were going to stay there for a few months. They claimed it was part of a new experiment in alternative education. She had no choice. She was told to cooperate or the children would suffer. Mira paused, her heart aching. She couldn't believe what she was reading. Her daughter and the other children had been taken, not lost. As she turned the pages, the story grew darker. Miss Angeli described how the children were forced to live in the building. They were taught strange lessons, asked to forget their families, even given new names. They weren't allowed to leave. Guards watched the area. Sometimes children cried at night, asking to go home. She tried to comfort them. She secretly kept a diary and recorded everything, hoping someone would find it one day. She wrote about small acts of rebellion, how she taught the children songs from home, how they secretly celebrated birthdays, how some children tried to run away but were caught and punished. Then one day a fire broke out in the forest nearby. In the confusion, a few children managed to escape. She didn't know who or how many. After that, the camp shut down. The men burned papers, destroyed photos, and disappeared. They left her behind, locked in a room, and hidden food. Days later, she wrote her last entry. I don't know if anyone will find this, but if you do, please tell the world. These children were not forgotten, they were stolen. Mira closed the journal and sat in silence. The lodge, the red truck, the missing driver, it all made sense now. It had never been an accident.
Oh.
The class had been taken as part of a secret operation, an illegal experiment that was later buried by fear and silence. Pertep placed a hand on her shoulder. We should go. It will be dark soon. They marked the place and took the journal with them. The return journey was slower. Mira's body was tired, but her mind was racing. She now had proof. She needed to bring this to light. Back in town, she met with Priya, the journalist who had written the first article. Priya read the journal, eyes wide with shock. It changes everything, she said. We can go public. The police can't. Ignore this. The next day, Priya published a new report, this time with photos from the lodge, pieces from the journal, and Mira's story. It went viral again. The nation was stunned. TV channels picked it up. Debates began. Questions were raised in Parliament. The police were forced to reopen the case officially, and a special team was sent to investigate the forest. Mira was invited to speak on national television. She told the world what she had found, how a drawing made by her daughter had led her to the truth. People across the country cried with her, supported her, and demanded justice. A few days later, the investigation team returned from the lodge. They found DNA samples, remains of burnt documents, and other evidence confirming the journal's story. But there was still no sign of the missing children, except for the names on the wall and the hope that some may still be alive. Then something unexpected happened. A man came forward from another city. He was in his 30s and had lived under a different name for most of his life. After reading Mira's story, he realized he might be one of the missing children. He remembered being in a strange place as a child, learning new names, being told his parents had died. He had escaped during a fire but was taken in by a couple who raised him far away. After DNA testing, it was confirmed he was one of the missing boys. Soon, 2 more adults came forward. Each had pieces of the same story. The journal had given them the courage to speak. They had lived hidden lives, carrying a past they didn't fully understand. Now, the puzzle was coming together. Mira had not found her own daughter yet, but she had uncovered the truth. And through her fight, other families had found lost children. She had broken the silence. The story was no longer about a tragedy. It had become a movement. Desperate mother, a hidden journal, and a small red truck had brought justice back into the light. And though the road was long, Mira knew she would keep walking it until the very end. The discovery of the hidden lodge and the teacher's diary had shaken the entire town and country. Suddenly, What was once thought to be a tragic mystery became a shocking story of secret kidnapping, imprisonment, and survival. For Mira, this was only the beginning. She felt the weight of every parent's hope and pain pressing on her shoulders. The truth was out, but the hardest part was still ahead. Finding the missing children, or what was left of them, and making sure justice was served. After the reports and TV interviews, the government couldn't ignore the case anymore. A special investigative team was formed, led by senior police officers, forest officials, and forensic experts. Their task was to search the lodge and surrounding forests thoroughly, gather evidence, and follow every possible lead. Invited to join the team as a key witness and a mother whose courage had opened the case again. The search began with careful mapping of the forest. Teams combed through the thick undergrowth, using drones and thermal cameras to detect anything unusual. Days passed with few results. The forest was vast, and time had changed its face. Some areas were swampy, others had fallen trees blocking the way. The team found signs of old campsites and discarded items, but nothing that clearly belonged to the missing children. One morning, the team discovered a hidden underground cellar beneath the lodge ruins. It was covered by broken wooden planks and thick layers of leaves. Inside, the air was cold and heavy. The walls were damp and covered in moss. Mira stepped inside cautiously. Her heart raced as the team shone their flashlights around. They found old blankets, some toys, and pieces of clothing. These looked very old, but they confirmed the place had been used for shelter. More disturbing was the evidence of cruelty. Rusted chains hung from hooks on the wall. Scratches and marks on the floor suggested that someone had been held there against their will. The forensic experts collected samples, hoping DNA tests might reveal if any of the missing children had been kept there. Mira couldn't believe her eyes. How could this happen? How could anyone do this to innocent children? She swallowed her tears and pressed on, determined to find answers. Meanwhile, news spread across the country. People were outraged. Social media exploded with hashtags demanding justice for the lost children. Politicians promised action. Some citizens organized protests. It was a national scandal now, and everyone wanted to know who was behind the kidnapping and why the case had been ignored for so long. As the investigation deepened, the police uncovered connections between the men who had run the secret learning camp and a powerful local politician. This politician had influence over the school's management and local authorities. It seemed the decision to use the red truck and send the children on an alternate route had not been a mistake. It had been planned to hide the kidnapping. The politician's name was Mr. Verma. When questioned, he denied all accusations and claimed he had no knowledge of the events. But evidence told a different story. There were phone records showing calls between Verma and the school principal on the day of the disappearance. Witnesses came forward saying they had seen strange meetings between Verma and a few men near the forest before the children vanished. Mira felt a mix of anger and fear. She knew going against powerful people was dangerous, but she also knew she couldn't back down. If she did, the children's suffering would be forgotten again. With the growing evidence, the police arrested several men linked to the camp driver's guards and local informants. They were questioned for hours. Some confessed to their roles, revealing horrifying details about how the children were kept, punished, and forced to stay. They said the camp was supposed to be a new education experiment, but it quickly became a prison. The children were scared, confused, and many tried to escape but were caught. One man, who was a driver for the camp, spoke about how he helped some children flee during the forest fire, but was threatened to keep silent. Another guard revealed that some children had died from sickness and injuries but were buried secretly in the forest. This revelation shocked everyone. It was unimaginable that the missing children had suffered so much without anyone knowing. Mira visited the police station every day, desperate for news. The authorities promised to keep her updated, but it was difficult. The investigation was complex and slow. She found herself torn between hope and despair. At night, Mira dreamed of Anya. Sometimes she saw her smiling, sometimes crying. She imagined holding her daughter's hand and finally bringing her home. But the harsh truth was that after all these years, finding Anya alive seemed less likely. Then, one day, a new lead came. The police received a tip from a man living in a nearby state. He claimed to know about a group of people who had hidden children in various places across the country to avoid detection. These children were adopted or raised by strangers who didn't know their true origins. The tip mentioned secret locations where children were taken, including forest shelters, remote villages, even urban slums. The investigative team expanded their search to these places. They worked with child welfare organizations, NGOs, and local police to find any children who matched the descriptions. This part of the investigation was slow and difficult. Many years had passed and memories had faded. Children had grown up and moved on. Despite the challenges, some children came forward. They were now adults, confused about their past, but willing to share their stories. Many of them had no idea who their real parents were or why they had been separated. They spoke about strange childhoods, sudden moves, and the feeling of something missing. These reunions were bittersweet. Families met long-lost sons and daughters, but the years lost could never be returned. Some children had adapted well, while others struggled to cope with the truth. Mira met a few of these adults in support. Groups organized for the survivors and their families. They shared stories of pain, hope, and healing. Mira found comfort in knowing she was not alone, but she still searched for Anaya. In the midst of this, the case sparked debates about the safety of children, the corruption in schools, and the role of local politicians in covering up crimes. The government promised new laws to protect children and better monitor educational institutions. Mira became an important voice in this movement. She spoke at rallies, met with officials, and helped create awareness campaigns. Her story inspired many to fight for justice and not give up on missing children. Months turned into a year, but the search continued. Then, a breakthrough came from a DNA testing lab. Samples collected from the forest shelter and from people who had come forward were matched. It confirmed the identities of several missing children, now grown adults. This scientific proof was crucial. It proved that the children had indeed been held in secret and that many survived against all odds. Mira was overwhelmed. She had tears of relief and sorrow. She thought about the years lost, the childhood stolen, and the hope that justice would finally be served. The trial against the accused began in a special court set up for this case. It was one of the most talked about trials in recent history. Witnesses testified, including Mira. She stood strong, telling the court everything she had learned, seen, felt. The accused men denied many charges, but the evidence was strong. After months of trial, the court sentenced the main culprits to long prison terms. The politician, Mr. Verma, was also found guilty of negligence and conspiracy. Though some of his crimes remained hard to prove, the verdict brought some closure to the families, but not complete peace. Mira still missed Anya every day. The search for her daughter and other missing children continued. Meanwhile, the survivors started rebuilding their lives. Support groups helped them deal with trauma and reconnect with their past. Many returned to school or found jobs. They learned to trust again, slowly. Mira felt proud to see these brave souls rise. Her fight had opened a door for them, a door to a new life. One evening, as Mira sat with Priya, the journalist, she reflected on the journey, from a mother's desperate hope to a national movement for justice. The story had changed many lives. They talked about the power of truth, the courage to keep searching, and the strength found in community. Mira knew that the scars of the past would never fully heal, But she believed in a better future, one where no child would vanish without a trace and where every parent's pain would be heard. She promised herself that she would keep fighting, keep hoping, and keep loving. Because sometimes even the smallest details, a drawing, a phone call, forgotten diary, could change the course of history. And for Miracle, that was just the beginning. The trial's verdict had been announced, and the courtroom was filled with a mix of relief, sadness, and quiet hope. Many of the accused were sentenced to prison, including those who had run the secret camp and those who had tried to cover it up. The politician's role was exposed, but some questions remained unanswered. Yet for Mira and many others, this was just the start of a new chapter, a chapter of healing, finding, and rebuilding. Even after all the investigations, trials, and reunions, Mira's heart ached for Anya. Her daughter was still missing. The knowledge that some children survived gave her hope, but the fact that Anya had never been found kept her restless. She knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. Mira continued her work with survivors and families of missing children. She helped create support groups where adults who had been kidnapped as children could share their stories and heal together. These groups became safe spaces where pain was acknowledged, tears were shed, but also where strength was born. One day, Mira received a letter. It was from a man named Arjun, who lived in a small town hundreds of miles away. Arjun said he had been following the story in the news and had some information. He claimed he knew of a woman who had cared for a little girl around the time of the disappearance. The woman was now elderly and living in a remote village, but she had once cared for a child who seemed lost, scared, and who never spoke about her past. Mira's heart quickened. Could this be Anya? She arranged to meet Arjun and visited the village. The old woman welcomed Mira with tears in her eyes. She remembered the little girl well, quiet, shy, often drawing pictures of a red truck in a big forest. The woman said the girl had been given to her by strangers who asked her to care for the child and keep her hidden. The girl had never spoken of her parents or school, only of a forest and a teacher named Anjali. Mira showed the woman a photo of Anya. The woman's face lit up with recognition. Although the girl had grown up and moved away years ago, this was the clue Mira needed. She had to find that girl. With the help of Arjun and local officials, Mira searched for the young woman. It took months, but finally, she was found living quietly in a nearby town. Her name was Asha, but DNA tests confirmed she was Anya. Meeting Anya was both joyful and heartbreaking. She was no longer the little girl Mira had last seen. She was a woman, carrying scars and memories from a past she barely understood. She had grown up in foster homes, always feeling a sense of emptiness. At first, Anya struggled to accept Mira as her mother. The years of separation had created walls of doubt and fear. But Mira was patient. She gave Anya time and space, sharing stories and memories, gently reminding her of the love that had never died. Slowly, the bond grew stronger. They began the difficult process of healing together. Therapy sessions, counseling, and family meetings helped Anya understand her past and embrace her future. Mira also worked to reunite other families who had been separated. Some reunions were emotional, filled with tears and laughter. Others were difficult, as years apart had changed people in ways that were hard to reconcile. But every reunion brought hope and closure. Meanwhile, government launched a national program to prevent such kidnappings in the future. Schools were required to register students more carefully, and transport routes were monitored. A special hotline was set up for reporting missing children. Child protection laws were strengthened. Mira became a national advocate for child safety and missing persons. She traveled across the country, speaking at conferences, meeting families, and pushing for better laws. Her journey had started with the loss of her daughter. It had grown into a mission to protect every child. Through all this, Mira never forgot the small drawing of the red truck, the one that had led her on this path. She kept it framed. In her home, a reminder of hope, courage, and the power of noticing small details. Years passed, and the story of the vanished class became a symbol of resilience and justice. Books were written, documentaries were made, and schools held annual remembrance days. The children who had survived shared their stories to inspire others and to remind the world that no one should be forgotten. Mira found peace in knowing that her fight had made a difference. Anya was back in her life, and though the wounds of the past would always be there, love and hope were stronger. She often thought about the long road that had started with a mother's desperate search and ended with a community coming together to face dark secrets. It showed her that even in the darkest times, courage, truth, and love could shine through. And so, Mira's story didn't end with the court's verdict or the reunions. It continued in every life touched, every child protected, and every family healed. The lost class was never truly gone. It had returned through the courage of one mother who noticed a crucial detail and refused to give up.